Welcome back to Two Signal with Glenn and Robel. Before we go any further, I would like to say thank you to everyone who tuned in last week.
Thank you.
Yeah, for your feedback and your encouragement.
Mm-hmm.
And today we have a different topic. We're talking about identity.
Mm-hmm.
It's a big topic. And we'll try to cover as much as we can with the time that we have when we return. So, Rebel, you asked for wine last week.
Yes, I did. Are we getting wine today?
We are getting wine.
Let's do this.
Thank God it's not 10 a.m. So, if you want to do the honors of opening the wine bottle,
let's do it. Obviously, for people that will listen to it, only can't see that I'm opening a very expensive wine.
Yeah.
So,
right.
Get ready.
Yeah.
There we go. So I'll just pour a little bit so I don't make it seem that I'm an alcoholic or something like that.
So while you're doing that, we are talking about identity. Mm-hmm. So first of all, what is identity and what are the ways people categorize and identify?
Yeah, I mean, identity is a pretty loaded concept, right? So identity is sort of the qualities of someone's being, their personality, behavior, belief, and their expression, and that could be associated to either a person
mm-hmm.
or a group.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we could have psychological identities which relate to self-esteem, self-image, and all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But essentially, it's that construction of a being, which is or a quality of when you're a part of a group.
Mm-hmm.
But if you look at the sort of where the word comes from, the Latin root meaning of it, it means the quality of being identical.
Mm-hmm.
So that's sort of what that means. But I mean, we could spend the whole podcast talking about the various ways that we identify. I mean, we've got ethnic,
mm-hmm.
so some of the big ones, political, there's gender now,
mm-hmm.
this whole heap of things that we sort of group ourselves,
mm-hmm.
categorize and group ourselves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, okay, before I go and tell my side, let's do cheers and let's test this wine.
All right. Cool.
Let's do that. Very nice.
Excellent. Like I know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah. So identity for me is the beginning of self-image construction.
Mm-hmm.
We start by identifying first, with our race, with black, white, Asian, brown, and then we identify with our gender, men, women, other, and we can take on the identity of our religion, Muslim, Christian, Buddhist, etc., etc. We can also identify with our qualifications. I have a degree, a master's, PhD, doctorate. We can identify with our career if we consider our career a respectable career.
Yeah.
We can identify with ideologies, politics, Democrats, Republicans,
Labor, Liberal,
all these things, and we can just continue to add on, and we're becoming this thing. It's always by acquiring more, by having more identities. We have now constructed the me that we say. Whenever we talk about ourselves, I do this and I am that. This is essentially what we think we are. Our identities become us, right? So these are the ways in which we identify. And so leading to, I guess, what leads a person to identify in the first place, and why are we so loyal to our identities?
So when it comes to identities, I mean, going back to what you were saying, so we've got so many qualities that we can identify with. And one of the things I like is looking at the root meaning of a word. and the one that I saw was what the root meaning of a person is. And the root meaning of a person is per means through in Latin, and sen means someone that's performing through. So someone is performing through these things. So it's essentially the persona was the root meaning of the Latin word mask. So something that you perform through. So of what you put your voice through. So it was this thing that we put on. So they'll put on when they go to stage, and they'll perform through that. But so going back to sort of your question was, what are the ways that
what leads a person?
What leads us to identify? I mean, it is a sense of, I mean, for me and for you, and people can obviously relate to it as well, but we get to a stage when we don't have, or we have a fear of being nothing or empty. So it comes from a sense of self occupation. So I'm occupied with myself, so I can't just be nothing. So it is the fear of being nothing. I don't have anything, so I'm empty. So we kind of go choose and pick certain identities in order to avoid the void. We go into the various categorization and identities that we pick: self-images, self-esteem, so individuality. My political thing becomes this thing. So we sort of build up all these sort of things, and we have multiple identities that we have, but we are one singular person, and it is quite at times burdensome. But we have different contexts of where we use our identity. So our behaviors change, with your close friend, when you go to your mum and dad. So there's a sort of identity that comes up, and when you go to a certain place, workplace, there are various identities that we can pick and choose depending on the circumstance. But all of that is to say once you've picked who you are, you don't ever change on people. So there is a sort of a cohesion that you maintain throughout your life, so you don't surprise people. So when we go into endeavors and relationships, that sort of affirm and anchor and cement our identities. So then that makes us become who we are, and those identities and all those sort of things make us loyal because it keeps us all together. So anything that threatens us in terms of that would dissolve or annihilate who we are, we sort of either got away from it. And if something does threaten or dissolve our identity, that's when we have obviously those personal crises. But what's your sort of view on that?
Yeah, so what leads a person to identify? For my case, I guess I can talk about what led me to seek identification in the first place. That would be when I first came to Australia, and high school was very hard to fit in. There were not a lot of people who looked like me, so there were no groups. You know how people are, they have their groups in high school. You have your cool groups, you have your nerds, and you have your... I didn't fit anywhere, and it was very difficult to form friendship and fit in.
Yeah, especially coming to a different culture as well.
And different language and everything. So at that time, African-American culture was the thing, right? These people look like me, and they act cool, and they are accepted by other cultures. So what a way for me to identify with this culture and seek acceptance from the other cultures. So music was everything for me. R&B, hip hop, I joined a dance class, and I wore hats to school, I had my collar up, I wore Converse, white Converse, and I got in trouble, but all the cool kids get in trouble. It goes with the identity, and it worked. I found friends, people thought I was cool. It got me through high school. Through identification. And so that was my early experience with identity and choosing and picking, which identity was going to work for me. Of course, you let go of that as you grow, but So that was my introduction. But there's other people may identify through fear, in terms of like politics.
Yeah.
Politicians would come up and say, immigrants are taking over, they're taking all the jobs. And out of fear, you can identify with that political view.
Yeah.
There's lots of other ways that people come to identity. Where the loyalty comes in then to an identity, some things like religion, you are loyal to it. Because religion, you almost feel like you can't question it. You inherited this religion from your parents as well.
Same thing, I think, with political.
Yeah, but I don't know. For me, political view, like I can shift as well. I'm not dead set on any political view, but I'm sure there are people who are dead set on it. Yeah. But with religion, again, coming from Ethiopia, it's a very religious country, and especially religion is really big part of our identity. And therefore you don't really mix with other religion. There is this us versus them kind of thing. There is this, our way is right, their way is wrong. The other thing's the same way of you. So we have this contempt for one another, and we're divided in this way, and we build and guard ourselves from other people, and our relationships are so surface because we don't want to give in, or we're maybe trying to convert the other person to our so it's always motivated through this thing, because our identities show up in every relationship. So
and that's why you can't even have conversation with people. I mean, when something such as some political view or religion, the moment that it becomes part of your personality or your identity, it's very hard to discuss on a rational level or fact or anything like that. You can see it when someone is dead set on a political view. You can't go into the conversation with them. I guess because there's no sort of expertise, or it's sort of opinion based. So anyone is. It's up for grabs for opinion, so there's no certainty in terms of like this is it for this thing, and we just go and it becomes part of identity, and we sort of fight for this thing, and everything is justified. The actions through because it's about moral superiority, like mine is the thing, but we'll go into sort of the causes, what the implications are, but and
the next question I have for you is, why do we get validation for making our identities obvious? Or why do we want to make our identities obvious? I can sort of give you an example. Like if we identify with fitness and health, not saying everyone, but there are some people who make their whole life about fitness and health. And, maybe it's they make money from it and that's why. But there is this thing seeking validation from it as well. And some spiritual people, they make it known they are spiritual, and they're in a sense seeking validation. People who are, aspire, who have aspirational identities, they make it known there are, they like exploring, they like traveling, they're different, they're not settlers, they like to try new things, and they get validation from that. So why do we do that? Why do we want to make our identity known, especially of politics, and why do we get validated from that?
Validated from it. I mean, the biggest thing is with the with getting validation, it's also context dependent, right? Like if I hold a certain political view that's shifting of my group that I'm in, I wouldn't announce it. But in certain situation, if it's socially acceptable, like you said, if certain thing is looked up on a high regard, then I'm able to show people that tell people I am this person. So, for example, what's a bookshelf? It's essentially a show of honor or a show of something essentially that you've read these books or you've acquired a certain knowledge, and that thing becomes the place that I live on, right? So it's a validation in terms of if reading and knowledge and gathering up information was not looked up as at a high regard, then you wouldn't signal that thing. Like, it wouldn't be part of your identity, right? So if I hold it, and if I can see that it's socially acceptable, and you've got a reward system that you can get feedback from, or you've got a feedback from, then if it's a positive feedback, and we always want to hold a positive self-concept about us. So, and we have aspirational identities, you know, I want to be a runner, I want to read, I want to be a reader, or I want to have this. So we always hold aspirational identities as well, not only the ones that we've chosen, but we also have positive aspirational identities that we want to become, right? Like, so then we sort of strive to get those, and we sort of try and get those signals from those things. But that validation serves as an anchorage, right? So the more it's affirmed, the more it's cemented, right? So the more it anchors us to that particular being. So if I'm getting some sort of reward from it, and we've all done it. It's not it's not something like other people do this.
We all
like
play the game.
If you sort of look at all your actions and the very intricate, deep, hidden actions and motives that you have, like I can say personally, is like, it's always skewed towards to gain something, or to gain some sort of validation. Like, I have this kind of personality, or I choose a personality, I choose an armor. So I always want people to see that in me. And I know it's so shallow, but that's us. And sort of the social group gives us these feedbacks, or this feedback. So I mean, it serves us to validate the things that we think are socially acceptable. In that sense, society sort of determines, or culture determines what's acceptable, and the more that the culture accepts and makes it a moral right, then we want the validation. So that hence we see people like going out and proclaiming, like, I am this, you know, I care for the environment, I recycle this and that. So it becomes part of an identity, but it's never for that thing, though. It's like it's for what it serves.
It's serving you in a sense.
Yeah.
All of these identities we add on, in a sense, serve us rather.
But also we need feedback. If we don't get feedback, or if we don't get validation, or we don't get affirmation, then there's really no point in being this thing, or showing this identity. So the validation plays an important role, and how you maintain it. So the ones that we can say, like, you know, I don't really care about whether someone thinks about me this, because if I'm this person and no one gives me the feedback, or it's not looked up on as on a higher level, what's the point of acquiring it, or what's the point of maintaining it, and it becoming a burden on you?
And also, we live in a society that has a structure in the form of a pyramid, and we all want to be on top, doing well, right? But if not on top, we want to be somewhere in the middle and doing well. Therefore, we seek to be respectable human beings. And to be respectable human beings, whatever that means, we need to add value, because we can't just be a nobody and be respectable. So we go to universities to have a degree, a master's, and so on. We add value to our being, and that needs to be validated. If I'm a doctor, you know, you respect me because that has a level of respect that adds to my value. If I am a spiritual person, I think my morality, and you still respect me. I am a righteous, So there's a level of thing that you're signaling out, and that needs to be validated. What's the point if we choose the universities that we go to because certain universities have high ranking in terms of reputation and other things, and it validates us if I go to that. If I go to the unknown university, which has no reputation, what's the point? It does nothing for me. So every single thing that we do, in a sense, is to add value, to add it to the me, and and to get validation from it. Yeah.
So that identity obviously serves a purpose. And if you're not getting feedback, why the hell
what's the point?
Why strive for it?
And also the thing is, once we have become these respectable human beings that we want to be, that's why we become so defensive as well. If you're, say, a doctor, I call you stupid, what's your reaction? You're outraged. Like, do you not know I am an intelligent person, which my intelligence has been validated by my doctorate degree. Like there is this thing that comes. So we need our respectability to be validated and to make it known to others.
Of course. Of course. And without it, I guess, we're sort of repeating the same point. Is
exactly.
You don't have validation. You wouldn't do that set.
And I guess for me, like, what am I signaling if I were to talk about my own sort of situation where I looked into and found myself doing this thing? I would say I have like aspirational identity where I show my ambition or my skills or my potential, look at all the things that I can do kind of thing.
Yeah.
And you get validated from being able to show little bits and pieces and things like that, and which could really be a trap as well, but that's another topic. But again, these little things that we do, if we pay attention to it, like, where does it come from? Like, if we're going to be honest about it, it's in a sense seeking validation and making it known who we are or who we want others to perceive us.
I mean, if you have a certain identity, and especially it's the ones that need validation or that affirm some part of your self-image. So if you go to a good restaurant and you identify as like a foodie or something like that, is that food really enjoyed if it's not posted on Instagram? I don't think so. It has a certain currency, especially like in the successful social media companies. Their success is sort of predicated on people building a personal space for themselves, like a personal boundary, a personal space where they can construct and maintain and create this sense of who they are, whether it's idealistic or whatever. But what they do is they provide you the ways that you can continually affirm and get validation and feedback. Now, when it's stopped, when people couldn't get validation, what did Instagram do? They removed the amount of like counters that people showed, right? Like, because people weren't posting enough. And the reason for that is they sort of discovered is like, it's because people continually looked at the like button and the counter, this many people liked and this many people liked it. So then people wouldn't get that feedback for posting. So they had to remove it.
They brought it back.
But in terms of the count, that doesn't exactly tell you.
Oh, you can. You have an option now whether to show the numbers or to hide.
To hide it. So again, it's just giving you that option, right? So but predominantly people wouldn't want. So it's because they sensed in a way when they got rid of it is because people weren't posting enough, and they said, as a business host, if people are not posting and your whole business predicates on people posting, and the reason people don't post is because you identify, look, maybe it's the fact that a lot of people are liking. If you don't get
feedback, then you take it off.
Exactly, or you don't get validation from it. What's the point? So I guess at the end of the day, let's sort of moving on to the next. Don't mind me while I pour more wine.
So now that we've talked about, what it is, why we do it, what are the implications and the consequences of identifying and categorizing yourself in these groups?
I mean, it has huge implications, right? We can see it from a personal crisis or identity crisis. All those sort of things arrive from a place of when you identify and you don't get the validation, or someone hurts you or someone pricks you, you get those personal hurts. But what we have to, as I mentioned at the beginning, was the root meaning of the word is the quality of becoming identical, right? That's what identity is. By that sense, you have to know that you by you choosing a particular identity or a social identity or a group, what you have to realize is by you choosing that thing, you're at the end of the day choosing to exclude. By as soon as you make a distinction that I am this, you automatically have excluded a bunch of people out of it. So it's sort of an isolating and binding prison cell that you have to live by, with the customs and with the rules of what that identity constitutes. So you have certain etiquettes and behaviors that's allowed within that group, and any actions that comes from the group is purely justified, right? So that's why we see when we sort of go, if it's racially motivated or ethnically motivated or politically motivated, the actions of your group is the right one, morally right. The other one is sort of the evil, the destructive thing, and we don't ever consider the other person, right? Like we don't consider them as us. So that's where we come to the point of like us versus them mentality. Is when you choose an identity, that's the thing that comes with it inherently. So just because you choose one and you may not have the impact, but unless you realize that you're sort of isolating yourself, you are excluding people, and with that becomes prejudice. What's prejudice? It's looking at things from a place of conclusion. So when I categorically put certain people in a particular bucket, and I say this person is this, so it makes it easy, obviously, categorically thinking for us as human beings and the way that our brains operate. We can't think of everything unless we categorize it. So chair, table, whatever. So we don't need to know distinctively what their features are, but we can say, this is a feature, like that's a table or that's a tree. But two trees are two different trees, right? Like you look at two trees, they're never the same, but we say this is a tree, right? So in that sense, so we will become, when you're categorizing, and you can go back in thousands and thousands of years of history, and you look at the sort of the conflict and violence, how that arises is purely an ideological battle, right? So us versus them mentality. So I want to dominate that person to become this, you know. It's then we say, no, we have good intent, you know, and hell is paved with good intentions. So I think I was telling you the other day, the monkey takes the fish out of the water and takes it up a tree in order to save it. But what is that story? Yes, it's a funny story or whatever, but what is that really telling us about? So the monkey living on its tree thinks everything should be on the tree if it is to survive and if it's not to struggle, and this is the right place for it. We've got all these kind of bananas and whatever, we've got trees to jump on, stuff like that. Then it looks at other things.
The fish is struggling.
The fish is struggling and it should be fixed. You know, like, why struggle? You know, then let me pick you up from.
Doesn't understand the fishes like a biology
or like their own interest and what's good for them. You don't look at that and say, let me put you up on a tree. So the moment that we do that, like, we don't even consider anyone. So we have no observation. So the moment every little thing comes from a place of prejudice, like you're prejudicing. You look at, as a Christian, you look at a Muslim, or a Muslim the way looks at a Christian. It's always from a place of prejudice, right? Like, it's always from a place of like judgment, where your moral codes are the right one. And this is what is acceptable. And everyone's, in terms of acceptability, is different. What's Hitler's whole entire thing? Is like, let's create a race, that is the thing that it should be. So let's build a personal space around us where this is the dominant thing, right? So it's the moment that he's made this distinction outside of what qualified the boundaries of these people here were enemies, or you don't even see them as people anymore. You know, they're the weeds that we have to weed out, or like these are the things. And the thing is, because it so justifies the action that you don't even see the sort of the humanity of it. You don't consider them. That's what I guess one of the stages of what's it called? Sort of a political fight or ethnic political fights that occur. Is one of them is you get to a place of extermination, right? So when you get to the place of extermination, you don't consider the other person as a human anymore. It's like as a cockroach, or like we've seen sort of thing. Like if you look at Hotel Rwanda, so that's sort of like two ethnical groups look at each other as in like they're not even human beings. You have to exactly. So I was trying to say genocide is when you get to a place where genocide is you don't consider the other person no longer human. You know, when you don't consider them longer human, you say, oh, he's a cockroach and let's squash him. And it's like in hindsight you look at it, how can a person think like this? You know, how could a person be like this? But that's what their identity brought them. Their ethnical identity brought them to that point.
And this is happening as we speak in Ethiopia. Right?
Exactly. So, but it happens everywhere. Like if you look at America, there's sort of that identity politics that's being played right now. You know, and people want to sort of categorize themselves as I'm a Democrat, I'm this, I'm a liberal, I'm this, and we sort of have we laugh and scream at someone that say, oh, we say this person's a Karen, you know, like, oh, like this kind of thing. But you have to realize what this means, you know, like by your essence, your view is this, but the Karen is someone that's so negative, that's not a human. But you have to sort of understand where she's coming from. What are her fears? Because as we said earlier, like it comes from a place of fear when you're identifying, like of being emptiness, of feeling emptiness and having this void and scared of your loneliness, scared of your nothingness, that you accrue these things, and it gives you a great occupation to be able to stand there and fight. And the funny thing is that every group has their thing where they scream out peace, love, you know, like why don't we love each other?
Let's remain and continue to hold these views against each other, but let's learn to tolerate one another, not let go of these things that we have, but let's just learn to tolerate each other.
I mean, as I say, the moment that people start proclaiming let's have love and peace, lock your doors, because hypocrisy is coming around the corners. You know, so this is what leads us to. And on a personal level, it's sort of this. We'll go a few things, but those are the sort of the implication, the excludingness, the loss of your humanity, and this thing becomes your prison cell that you live by. How do we define freedom? If the way we define it is freedom from, right? Freedom from what? How do we see it? It's freedom from what? From all the identities that have kept me and that are ruling me. You know, like I don't like who I am, or I don't like what you make me feel in certain situations, how relationships break up. Like, I don't like the way you make me feel. What does that mean? It's my identity is in conflict. You're dissolving, and you're attacking this thing that I have. And the moment that you pull me through an ordeal or a place of trying to annihilate my identities, then when you do those things, I go into a personal crisis. I don't know who I am anymore because you've attacked this thing that I've always felt. And because we've seen it in our relationship where both of us sort of hold an image of what you should do and what I should do. And normally the fights that we do have, or the arguments that we do have, come from where? from a place of like what I should have done or what you should have done. You know what I mean? It's because you have a concept of what I should be like, right? And I have a concept of what you should be like. So when you sort of go outside the boundaries or you don't do the expectations, my expectation of what you should do is justified because I have it. Because do you know what I mean? I want to hold you to that standard, and it's the same. It's vice versa.
Yeah.
So and we go into that argument, but if you sort of observe, like you're not a contained thing, like you're a dynamic, changing person, and what we want is people to hold a certain, I guess, behavior or identity that's so cohesive across thing, so a particular archetype of a person, then we go through life maintaining that. Once we maintain it, we go through life going through it. And what's a midlife crisis? Midlife crisis is when you've gone through all your life maintaining a same view, the same activity, the same behavior. A midlife crisis where you say, I had enough.
Yeah,
like,
I had enough maintaining this image.
This is exhausting. Like I've maintained this sameness. Like I'm changing.
Yeah.
And you have conflicting identities that come conflicting wants and contradicting wants to who you are. But you maintain and you fight this this thing. You maintain it, and across time, you get to a stage where you're like, I don't want it anymore. I don't want to be maintaining this thing anymore.
Yeah.
And you go into this crisis where you do things that you were never allowed to do. When you rebel. You rebel. It's a sort of a rebellious. And I do love the idea of midlife crisis.
Yeah.
It's sort of a realization of the silliness or the craziness of maintaining a single being.
It should happen faster.
It should happen. It should happen. And I feel
it
like
wakes you up. It wakes you up to see that you don't need to do these things anymore. You just be you. Figure it out. You don't have to continue to live these lies and maintain this image anymore.
Yeah, and it is like burdensome. Like imagine maintaining multiple things as a solitary being. You know, you maintain this thing like for your entire life, and it's burdensome because you have to maintain it with across different contexts, and like you have to do this, you have to do that. Like it's exhausting, right? So because it's exhausting, and like that's what midlife crisis is like. I had enough. And that's as much as we sort of scoff at it, but I think it's a good idea that I like. But what's sort of your what are the things that you've seen? I know I've sort of been long-winded about it, but what is your view on the implications of where identity leads us and that kind of stuff?
Like each identity has its own consequences and implication, and you've gone into details with it. Religion, people have killed in the name of religion. People continue to kill in the name of God, you know. We can fight about it and so things like that. If our career is our identity or our achievement or success, we can have such contempt for other people. You know, these people who have not done much, you know, these settlers who don't have aspiration. And we can continue to look down on others. And, you know, this is a characteristic, an identity that we couldn't do without, I guess. But more than the comparison, more than the little struggles we have internally and all the sort of thing, it's the human being. So on individual level, we're all different, you know. Me as an individual, I'm different from you. But psychologically, we're all the same. The wealthy Australian man living in the northern beaches is psychologically the same as the village man who is living in Ethiopia and working hard to survive and provide for his family. In a sense, they both have experienced a little bit of happiness, fear, anxiety, uncertainty, a little bit of joy. So psychologically, they experience the same thing. But when you put them into this identification and category, they are worlds apart. They cannot have a conversation. If these two were to meet, they're not having it's their identities who are having a conversation. It's not the people.
Yeah.
And if the identities are to have a conversation, what can they have in common? There is nothing to talk about.
Exactly, yeah.
But of course they have in common feeling fear. What is it like to experience fear? What is it like to have joy and happiness? You know, when you have your firstborn, you know, they both have experiencing this joy and happiness.
Yeah.
We lose a sense of our humanity when we only see identification. When I see a person and I see white person or black or brown or Asian, I fail to connect with the humanity. So we lose a sense of our humanity, and that's why we can be so violent and so cruel to these other people we consider the others who are on the wrong. And if they die and if anything happens to them,
it's justified. It's justified. So, I mean, imagine someone killing someone in the name of religion. I mean, how you can justify it? How you're okay with it if you're sort of a religious person, or not as in like being caught up in religion, but the religiousness of like being a human,
love and stuff.
Like if you have this something like you go and kill the thing, is like no, that's okay. Because they didn't.
So long as we remain, you know, divided, so long as we continue to say I'm American or I'm Australian, I'm this and I'm that, it's not. We can't stop talking about peace and stop talking about love, and we're all the same. We're not. We continue to hold these things and we continue to discriminate against each other silently, but then we publicly talk about love and how love is, you know.
So I think it's just a hypocrisy of it.
So I guess this leads us to the last question. Like, can we be without an identity?
Look, I would say yes. And I think it's sort of imperative on us, if not to have no identity as possible, but to have a smaller identity as possible. But the more we maintain an idea of our individuality, or the concept of a certain group becomes part of our identity, we're continually gonna ignore what it is to be a person, where you can change and it becomes your container and your perimeter, where you create a personal space and a boundary where you look at other people from this space, because you don't want someone coming in and annihilating it, right? I do like this movie. I know I've tried to watch it a few times and like it is Annihilation, the one on Netflix. So that's sort of like when they go into the jungle, where this thing exists, and the reason that she goes in there and tries to find, like, she has to annihilate herself. It's a good movie. The other one is V for Vendetta. It's like you've become the mask. You've worn the mask for so long that you've become the mask. So we sort of have to annihilate this thing, and we have to distinguish from the mask and the person. You know, like we're not advertising machines. So we shouldn't advertise these identities or personalities so that we can maintain a cohesive thing throughout our life. It's okay to be to incorporate multiple being, but you can only do that if you're a being. And on a personal level, that how this has sort of affected me is like, because I do 2 degrees. I go into one of my degrees. Well, when I'm doing that, I'm pretty competent at it, and I get the feedback from it, and I'm pretty good at it. You know, and that thing makes me, gets me to a place where, like, you know, like I'm actually okay. Yeah, like I'm actually okay. Like I actually get this stuff. Then I go into my engineering class, and you sit down and you go through this advanced level of maths, and like you've got early high school leavers. I'm 33, so they've left high school and they've sort of come into it and they're just doing all this maths and they're like, oh my god, like what the hell is this? And you go into a different class where you're sort of planning an engineering project for Cambodia, where how should we build huts, and you go to the next one, you do a physics class and you're like, whoa, like I'm lost in here now. And the reason that I'm lost is because that different context of where I did like it, the other degree, my business degree, it's like I'm comfortable in that zone, and that identity is giving me a sense of mental self-worth. Be like, I can figure it out, but then I jump into this section and I'm lost. Then what happens in those situations? And where did I find myself is I found myself sort of questioning, is it even right thing to do this course? And I've sort of told just like it's so hard. Like maybe once I finish my masters, I'll just drop this one and just go get a job. You know, and like I kind of think
it's not getting validated. It's challenging your view of yourself, and you don't like that to be challenged.
Exactly, and in the moment, like I'm like, oh my god, what is it? What have I put myself into? And I realized it wasn't really about the content of the subject. It was more the struggle was within me, because I held this idea like I can solve things, but when I went into the extreme place of where it was difficult, and I didn't want this other thing to be invalidated, you know, and I tried to have this conversation internally of like, why I shouldn't do this course, and why I shouldn't do this, and blah blah blah, and I'm like, look, I've started this, the feeling of being invalidated was so hard, and that came from an identity.
That's why we give up when things get hard, because it challenges us. It challenges the fact that, you know, that
because it was threatening my threatening my identity and like my comfort zone, my anchor, and because it was doing all those sort of things, because it was so difficult. And I'm like, then you kind of go, am I lazy? Am I not? And you're kind of thinking about something else. I'm like, is it me?
And you go and
but it's
self-help maybe?
Yeah. And like, the thing is, like, you get, wait a second. Like, there's actually an internal thing. Like, I don't want myself to be invalidated. And this thing just happens to be a threat. And you kind of go, look, where does, like, this fear or the ego, or that's my ego, right? Like, I didn't want my ego to be invalidated. So, where does this thing lie? And once you sort of see it in one situation, you can kind of see it in various other situations as well. And it kind of lies every time in the thing I avoid, or in the thing that I'm good at. You know? And so in that sense, like, it's best to not have as many identities as possible. And we're parents, and we want our son to be in a particular way. And the reason is because, like, it gives us a great sense of that we are doing a great thing. You know, we want our son to be this particular way, and we sort of put pressure on him and all that kind of thing. And because we want the validation, like we're an okay young parent who had our son at a very early age. But look at us, like, we're doing okay. And there's a great book, I think. Well, the takeaway from it is bad, but there's a book, Mindset, which is where they took these kids from a New York high school, and what they did was that they split them in groups. So, like, they put one person, like a bunch of kids in one group and a bunch of kids in one group. So for one group, they gave them a test, and they gave them similar tests, and for one group they told them, hey, you're smart, and you're really brilliant, or you're intelligent, or that kind of thing. So then the next group, when they handed their work, they kind of told them, hey, like, you must have really worked hard for this, like, or you worked hard, or you did this, or you did that. Like, it was more, so the way they classified it is like the ones that were told smart were told they were like fixed mindset people. So what happened was, and the other one was the growth mindset. And so then what they did is the next day they gave them harder tests. And the one that they were told smart, when they started doing the test, they would either make up excuses to go to the bathroom and stay there for a while, or make complaints or throw tantrums or cry or make up excuses and all this sort of thing they did. And they did all of this in order to avoid that, to show that they were still smart, but they made up excuses why they couldn't do it. They felt sick and they just didn't want to be involved in it. And the other ones, they just sat down and they actually did the test, and there was no complaints or anything like that because they were told you were hardworking. And after reading it, and I kind of went, oh, look, that makes sense. Maybe like I should implement a growth mindset in my son. But once I looked at it in my situation, and the book's takeaways, you should have a growth mindset as opposed to a fixed mindset. That's sort of the takeaway of the book. But the takeaway I disagree with now is because the takeaways don't have identity at all to begin with. You know, like it doesn't matter whether your growth's fixed or whatever, like it's your identities that play a part in all this. So why not have an identity at all? Like if you didn't have an identity, it doesn't matter if I tell myself I'm a hard worker, blah, blah, blah. That's still an identity. At some point, that thing is going to be a burdensome challenge. And there's going to be a time where more work is required that I can't do. So then I'll become to avoid it. Right? So I think their takeaway is like choose between this identity and not that one. But the takeaway should have been like, don't have an identity at all. Like if you didn't have an identity, you wouldn't be in this struggle in the first place. So that's what they should have taken away. So I think it's best, if not possible, to drop as many identities as possible where it prejudices you, where it isolates you, where it binds you, and where it constricts you into a particular prison, where the other people, you don't see them as them, like you don't get information or you don't have any observation of the thing. So we continue on the same vicious cycle of maintaining the same thing, and look at our whole society where we are. So I think if not, I think the more identities you have, the more I've found, the more that it makes you dumber. That's what I think, because it makes you avoid things. It isolates you, and you become so anything that threatens that thing you avoid. You know, like you avoid. Like look at some societies. Like, look at the immigrants. Like they're coming to take our jobs or whatever. Like, do you know what I mean? Like that.
Have somebody to blame.
Exactly. Yeah. So and I think it's best not to have as many identities as possible. If not zero identities. What do you think? You think it can be done?
So to be without an identification is to be without self-image. And, you know, self-image, we're attached to it. You know, it's not where our ego is. Yes, of course, it's possible to be without an identity, but we will struggle because it's hard to let go of that self-image. Maybe I worked so hard to construct this self-image, especially if I have, you know, studied and have gone out of my way to get this degree, to say, I have a degree, I'm a qualified person. And you tell me, don't identify with that. You know, some of us make money out of identifying with a political group and things like that, religion and things like that. So the attachment is so deep, it's hard for people to pull away from it, because without their identification, they're going to be empty. They're going to be nobody. Nobody wants to be a nobody. We want to be a somebody. That's why we have self-help books to learn about how to improve ourselves, how to become and this and that, to add more value, not to let go. What? So we're afraid of being empty. We're afraid of being a nobody. So we need to identify. But the beautiful thing about letting go for me, when I came to this understanding, it was very challenging for me. I didn't want to accept it because I had a set of mind about who I was. I had an identity that I needed to keep going that path. But I came to understand it's exactly the reason why I feel depressed sometimes, where I feel most of my inner struggle come from my identity because of my self-image, because I've put on myself on this pedestal. I am this and I am that, and when those things are not validated, I go into my little shell like, oh, I'm depressed. Oh, look at me, self-pity, like, oh my God. You know, most of our psychological problems are attached to our identity. Yeah.
100%.
Yeah, and that's why last week when we said self-help doesn't work, because self-help builds up on it and how to overcome this feeling rather than, you know, it doesn't show you where it came from. That's why it doesn't work. But I realized then it was my identity. I had so much ego with this thing. And that's why, like, if I, you know, as soon as I finished, my degree, I worked in some other fashion areas, but then there was a time in my life where I was unemployed, and to fill in the gaps, I went into work in retail, and I hated it so much. I felt like I didn't belong. I'm too good for this. What? Like, I have worked so hard to get out of this industry. Now I'm back in here. No, I struggled with it. So that's what it does. We struggle with it. And sometimes when we work so hard and we have this career to get validated, and when it doesn't give us that thing that we thought was going to give us, we struggle with it. So it's this identity that I think half of our problem will be solved if we were to do away with our identity. Most of the things that will be
very
solved.
Prideful. It's very justified and
we would solve most of our internal problem if we were to do away with it. What it would mean is that we go back to being children. Look at children. Children don't see color. Children don't care if a child is there, and if there's a person and the person is talking with them, do they care if that person is a CEO or as a cleaner? They don't care. Like, children just interact. They see a human, they like what you do, they just interact with you. They're not corrupted yet. But we are so corrupt now. And so it's hard to uncorrupt our mind, but we know slowly. But I think the beginning to, you know, uncorrupt ourselves, if that's even a word, I don't know, is to be able to see, I've made a word, to see that what it is, I guess, you know, to see it, to go and say, to admit to yourself, like, you know what, this is the problem, which is not the easiest thing to do. But if you start from there and you see that identification is the problem and it is that it's affecting you, yada yada, then the action is up to you. What you do from there, it's up to you. But if you want to have peace, if you want to be free, then your action is to let go of your identity.
And look, I mean, we do obviously still struggle with certain aspects of our identity. So I mean, the thing to also observe is the fact that we're having our identities, we scoff at other identities. So where we scoff at them, where we say, like, how can that person have this identity? Like, how can they have this? And like, what a stupid thing! Like, what a stupid thing! Like the conservatives or the
how stupid they are.
Like, because it's you think it's stupid, but you have to realize, like, you're doing the very same thing. Like, you're doing the very exact same thing. It's not you're not coming from a free place. You're still trapped in identity, and unless you kind of see the personal identity, as we mentioned at the start, is those qualities of someone's being, their expression, their behaviors, and all those things, either a person or a part of a group, right? Unless you kind of realize like those things determine all your behaviors, and they are the shackles, and they are the determinant of who you proclaim to be. I am. You know, what happens when you sort of wear your most flashiest clothes, or when you wear a suit. The suit kind of gives you an armor. It's a different presence. When you inhibit a particular costume, you become the costume.
Yeah.
You know, and metaphorically, like those identities are your clothes.
Yeah.
And we kind of pride with them, and we inhibit them, and as I say, like we say this is a person. You say this is the person, but as I say, like the root meaning of person is the Latin word for mask, which is per through sona's voice. So like you put through a voice through a mask. You put through like we're all kind of trapped in this performance and act that we don't want to admit, that we judge everything in terms of categories. We judge anyone that comes into contact, either race or something like that. Like you kind of judge them based on the categories that they belong to, or the conclusions that they belong to. And it's very, very dangerous.
Yeah.
The more that we can see it, and the thing is that because we're not growing as a society, like economically or politically or anything like that, people can kind of see like there's a lack in resources. So what's the best thing to do when you lack it? So it's to join the group that you think will get you the resource, to identify with the political group, to identify with the religion that will give you salvation, whatever you choose. And it's best to realize, like, I'm not trying to obviously attack spirituality or anything like that, but I'm trying to say, even if you are spiritual and religious, whatever denomination, are you, your actions, are they a human action, or like, are you a human, or what does it come from? What does it spring from? So I think it's best to kind of look at those things and realize identity is your sort of obstacle into most things. And as much as we don't want to scoff at it, but I think having less, I think it's not a matter of choosing which identity is best. I think all identities have the same exact implications.
Yeah.
How do you want to wrap this up?
Yeah, I guess I think we wrapped it up really good. Yeah. That's our take on identity. Yeah. And
it's pretty loaded as well.
We may revisit this topic in the future. If there's any questions you guys want us to sort of revisit or go into, we'll be happy to do another episode on this. But that's all the time for today. We've gone a little bit overboard, but it should be fine.
Topic, it is a big loaded concept. So thanks for tuning in. Feedback, please, and we're planning to have a guest very soon.
Yeah.
So look out for that.
All right. See you guys.
See ya.
Bye.